Welcome to John and Louise on Life, and this week, consumer Christianity. Is it a good thing?
We've got an interview with Carrie Summers, who is the founder of Fashion Revolution.
And the third thing is a surprise.
Because we can't remember what we recorded. Anyway, we're going to do some reviews as well, so we'll see you in a minute. Bye!
Well, the first thing we're going to talk about is consumer Christianity, and is it a good thing? Consumerism is simply you, being the consumer, have the power to decide how you spend your money and where you go shopping.
Right.
You have the power. But the trouble is, people have taken that as their attitude to church as well. Like, they have the power. They are the consumer, and they're going to assume the brand of Christianity that they want. And if you don't meet what they're looking for, then
they shop elsewhere. Okay, I get
and
it.
so we ditch church in one place, we go to another place. That doesn't meet my needs, I move on.
Okay, but lots of people are going to lots of different churches and lots of different meetings, conferences, Zoom calls, everything at the moment, because you can sit in your lounge in Devon and go to church in Zimbabwe if you want to. So I don't think there's anything wrong in that at all. Do you?
I would disagree, actually.
Okay, all right.
Because what people are doing, what church leaders are finding, actually, and this isn't any particular church, but churches across the board, is that people are going to church in Zimbabwe and Birmingham and all sorts of places like that, but then not attending their own church and not being a part of that and dipping out on that. And it's not everybody, but there are some people doing that.
But you can't tell who's coming to who out of your normal membership is coming to your church anyway, can you?
Well,
you can't tell by views.
When you talk to them about the sermon on the last Sunday and they go, yes.
Oh, we didn't see that one. Did you see the other one, or the other one, or the one before that? What are people buying into then? I mean, what are people looking for?
Well, I think we shouldn't have a consumerist mentality when it comes to church. It's actually, we should be looking to where God has called us and where we can serve, not where we can have our needs met.
Okay.
I mean, the two signs of a consumerist Christian. It's very kind of him to pull over like that for us. He saw we're recording, and he's turned around anyway.
Oh, okay.
Two signs of a consumerist Christian are they say, that church didn't meet my needs, so I didn't go there. Or if they've been to the service in the morning, I didn't get anything out of the service.
But you hear that all the time, and that's before COVID.
Oh no, it's nothing to do with COVID. This has been going on for years. We're a consumerist society now. We're used to our money having power, and with our money we can do what we like, and it brings us the benefits of what we want.
Yeah, but there's going to be a lot of people out there saying that we go to our normal church on a Sunday, we listen to their online church, and then we like to do this one, and then we like to do that one, and for some people that it's not consumerism, it isn't. It's just wanting a bit more variety. Horses, they were nice, and How are you differentiating between people who are just trying to get everything they want because they're just chasing after whatever they want to hear, and so it's just feeding their need to have whatever they want, and people who are listening to, an opportunity to go to their friend's church.
Yeah.
I mean, like we listen to Tim and Karen, right?
Yeah, and Chris
and Chris and Roz, because we never get to go to their church because we're all preaching at the same time.
Yes.
So actually, to hear them preaching is really nice.
No, it's a great question, and most people who sort of go off and listen to other churches as well are not acting like consumer Christians, but when you turn your back on the local church, you say it's not meeting my needs, you say it's just not what I want at the moment, then you have made yourself the focus and not God the focus and you are putting your own needs first to put against the needs of others. See, the beauty of Christianity, the beauty of the church, is it's not about yourself, it's about others. It's not about going and getting your needs met, it's about meeting the needs of others, building one another up, encouraging one another, being there for one another. And if you do that for somebody else and somebody else does that for you, we are enriched. We are part of a community that loves and cares and builds one another up. Whereas you can't get that if you decide, well, I'm going to go to a church in Birmingham now because I can, because it's online and all churches online. They can't disciple you. They can't. There's nobody there on the end of a phone. Who do you phone? Does the pastor know you?
No.
No. You know, is the pastor praying for you regularly? You know, we try and pray for all the people in the church on a regular basis. In fact, Rosie's newsletter means that everyone in the church gets prayed for once a month at least.
Yeah.
But as leaders, we do that. Try and do that more often.
Maybe people like to be anonymous. Maybe they just like to sort of not really, be part of it.
Okay.
A lot of things now online means that you don't have to participate in any way.
Well,
you
it
can
does.
sneak into church.
Yeah,
Nobody knows you're there. Some people are trying out church for the first time without having to walk into the building.
That's brilliant. That's amazing. And churches have stories like that to tell, where people have gone, said, "Oh, I quite like that church. I'm not a Christian, but I'd like to find out more about Christianity.
Yeah.
I'm going to go and see what they're like before going there." And I've heard stories of that, and that's amazing. And that's when the internet works so well. But I mean, anonymous Christianity, find that one in the Bible.
Yeah, I know. A couple of runners. But also, if you get kind of bogged down with things that you don't agree with in the church, if you just say, right, that's it, they're not really preaching anything that I agree with, and I'm just going to go and find a church that does preach something that I agree with, then you're never going to be challenged, are you, in your perceptions of things? You're never going to be... I mean, occasionally I like to be made uncomfortable because it challenges.
That's easy on most church pews, isn't it?
No, why I believe what I think, or why I think what. Oh, you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I don't. No, you're absolutely right.
We need to be challenged on why we believe what we believe, because otherwise we just stagnate and we become very dogmatic about stuff, and well, that's how it is and that's what I've always believed. But actually what you always believe might be a load of rubbish. It might be, it might need challenging.
We've all got views that are out of alignment with the Bible.
Yeah. And
we do need each other. We need the Word of God, we need the Holy Spirit, and we need each other to bring ourselves into alignment with what the Bible says. Yeah. All right,
so how do we check ourselves then that we are not just consuming all this stuff that we can get now?
I think you say, when I'm involved with the church, is it about meeting my needs or about meeting other people's needs?
And about
am I asking?
Worshipping God.
Well, yeah.
That's
but
the
also,
go, isn't it?
Have you come away from church or the online church service and said, well, that didn't meet my needs? Those are consumerist questions. Those are the two questions. And if you find yourself consistently saying those things, then perhaps you need a realignment yourself.
Because you're the common denominator, aren't you?
We all need to check ourselves all the time with these things. Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
Good. I like that. That's interesting. Well, that was fun, wasn't it?
It was.
It wasn't too bad at all. Didn't hit too many potholes. Just to let you know, we were not out on a jolly or breaking lockdown at all. We were going to do the church banking, so we thought we'd do a video at the same time and kill two birds with one stone.
And now for an interview with a woman who had one of the world's first fair trade fashion companies and is now one of the world's top fashion activists.
This week we are interviewing Carrie Summers, who is a fashion designer, an entrepreneur and the founder of Fashion Revolution, the world's largest fashion activism movement.
She recently sailed in an all-female crew to the Galapagos Islands, researching microplastics. And apart from all of that, she's also a long-term friend of ours over many decades. And she was born and raised in Devon, where we are currently coming from. So welcome, Carrie. Thank you ever so much for your time. It's brilliant to see you and talk to you today.
It's good to catch up.
It is.
It is, likewise. Really delighted to be here.
Okay, so have you got some great, interesting questions to ask Carrie?
Well, I thought we'd start off by, you've actually given a lot of the background there, but Carrie, just tell us a bit about where you've come from, the sort of things you've been involved with, businesses, and how you've come to be where you are today.
Okay, that's a very short question with a very long answer, so I will try to keep it quite condensed.
Yeah.
So, I guess it started really when I went off to do a master's in Native American Studies at the University of Essex. Between my master's and my PhD, I went sailing in the Caribbean and across the Atlantic for a year, and I came back with a sort of fully funded PhD ahead of me, and I had the whole summer ahead. And when I'd been doing my research in Ecuador, I'd seen, and I just remember it so clearly now, I'd gone one morning with the producers to buy their wool. It was about 6 o'clock one Saturday morning, and I just remember the balance scales. I mean, it's an international symbol of justice, and I remember them being loaded with wool on one side, and then these producers who only spoke very rudimentary Spanish being charged a price which just bore no resemblance to the cost per kilo. And I saw that injustice. And so I went back. I think my mum lent me £500, and I went back to help them, to give them the money to buy their raw materials in bulk. I did some designs. I mean, I had no background at all in design, but I knew I could probably do better than the designs they were making at the time, and sold them at some little sort of events and fairs around Devon, and they were really successful and sold out within 6 weeks.
These were jumpers or hats or?
Jumpers at the beginning, mostly jumpers. So started off with knitwear designs, and so by the time it got to September, I postponed my PhD, which ended up just getting indefinitely postponed, and set up Pachacuti. So I had a shop in Exeter for several years, and eventually moved up to Derbyshire, and now Pachacuti moved to Staffordshire. So the business kind of grew, moved into Panama hats, and became the first company in the world to be Fair Trade certified by the World Fair Trade Organization. And I think also really importantly, we were part of a 3-year project, EU project, to do with the traceability of fair trade products. And it was the only product that wasn't a commodity. So the others were kind of, I don't know, vanilla, coffee, cocoa, something like that. And this was the only finished product. So I'd traced the Panama hats back to the GPS coordinates of each weaver's house, to the GPS coordinates of each parcel of land where the straw grows, as well as collecting sort of around 60 different social, economic and environmental indicators, because I always think, well, how can you say you're sustainable unless you're measuring your impact and you know that you're reducing your impact year on year? So I knew that transparency was important. I knew that transparency was incredibly important in the fashion industry, because you had to have visibility of your supply chains in order to know what was happening in them. And so for years and years, I was banging on about transparency. Nobody was interested. No one was interested in this work we'd done. It was so frustrating, because it was, we had an intern out for, I think, 6 months or a year in Ecuador doing this research, and I knew how valuable it was and how important it was. And then come the 24th of April 2013, the Rana Plaza factory collapsed in Bangladesh. And that's when, in the day or two afterwards, we saw the activists actually having to search through the rubble to find the labels to prove which brands were producing there. And I think a lot of people thought, the brands, they're just waiting to get their, sort of PR story in place. And I don't think that was the case most of the time. Most of the time, they genuinely didn't know what their relationship was with that factory. And slowly, people started to say, well, this is why transparency is important. You know, how do these brands know? You know, how do they know what the conditions are if they don't even know that their clothes are being made in this factory? And it was, I guess, it was about 3 or 4 days after the factory collapse, and I was having a Sunday evening bath. Didn't have an Archer's podcast to listen to, which was unusual for me. And the idea for Fashion Revolution, and I always think it wasn't really my idea because it just like hit me in the bath, almost as a fully formed idea. The name Fashion Revolution, the idea of doing something on the anniversary. And it seemed like a good enough idea to get out of the bath and do something about it. I think if I'd stayed and carried on with the rest of my bath, Fashion Revolution wouldn't have happened, but I knew that I had to get up and act on it. And that's what I did.
Fantastic.
Right, and for those people that don't know, can you tell us a bit more about Fashion Revolution, please?
Yes. So Fashion Revolution, I mean, going back to transparency, I mean, we believe that transparency is the key to transforming the industry. So we work to change the sort of the culture around fashion, consumer habits. We work to try and change the industry of fashion, and we work to change policies as well, because we know legislation is really important. And we do this through kind of campaigning, advocacy work, through education, and through creating some really fantastic resources. So we started off by asking a really simple question: who made my clothes? And you would expect that most brands should be able to answer that question. But most of them at that time couldn't. They didn't know where their clothes were made.
So have the public got behind this themselves? You know, I mean, has shopping changed, for example? Because, I mean, at the moment, obviously, all the shops are closed and it's difficult to get hold of new things unless you order it online. So like you've just said, you know, if you can't find out information online about that company, it's pretty difficult. But do you think things have changed in the way we shop?
Yes, I do. I think certainly the idea of like buying clothing secondhand is changing. The resale market, from all we're hearing, is exploding. And it's expected to be bigger than the fast fashion market within the next 10 years. I think another thing that's really changed is we're starting to realise the power of our voices to bring about change. And it was probably only like 3-4 years ago when I was saying, look, what's happening to the younger generation? I remember being a student and being out on the streets of Exeter, going on like no grants, no chance rallies and CND marches, being out supporting the ambulance men and the firemen with my placards. What's happening these days? And then suddenly this whole amazing youth movement has taken off with, you know, the sort of Fridays for, you know, the youth climate and you know, and Black Lives Matter, and we're really seeing people, and we're seeing the power of voices to bring about change, and we know it makes a difference. It was the very first Fashion Revolution week it was a day back in 2014, and then we expanded into a week. And somebody who was an insider, like a consultant in the industry, said that for every one person asking who made my clothes, they were taking that as representing 10,000 people who thought the same way but couldn't be bothered to do anything about it. And I think that's really powerful because it shows how much notice brands take of those messages because they want to keep their customers. And
so when is Fashion Revolution Week this year? I know it's in a few months' time, isn't it?
It is 19th to the 25th of April.
And what sort of things should we look out for? Being in the media or perhaps in wherever, what sort of things, and how can we take part as well?
What should we be doing?
Right, well, there's Get Involved packs for citizens. I think there's an online one as well, but there's Get Involved packs which should be available to download any day now, hopefully this week. And we have Get Involved packs for citizens, for brands and retailers, for unions, for producers, for students and educators as well. And there's probably actually a lot of good stuff in there for parents who are homeschooling as well, because there's some fantastic educational resources on our website. Yeah, I mean, we've got a sort of saying, a mantra at Fashion Revolution: be curious, find out, and do something about it. So do your research, ask the questions, never be afraid to ask. I mean, I'm terrible. If I go into a shop and I want to buy something, I will ask them, and I'll be like, well, this is viscose. Can you tell me, does this company have a sustainable viscose policy? Can you tell me anything about this? You know, which is the most sustainable brand if you go into a fashion retailer? You know, ask them questions on social media. Ask them, you know, do you know who made my clothes? So do your research and ask questions. Look at the materials, look at where it's made. But also just every day, I mean, every time you put a load in the washing machine, there's about around 700,000 microfibers which are going out into the oceans. So, you know, again, just be aware, try to minimize your washing, try and wash on lower temperatures, try and use a liquid detergent and conditioner rather than powders. And, you know, I think a lot of it just comes down to we don't need to wash our clothes as often as we do wash them. But until we get legislation to put microfiber filters on all washing machines, which really needs to happen, you know, every time we wash synthetic clothing, as I saw at first hand when I sailed from the Galapagos to Easter Island last year, all of those microfibers are just going straight out into the oceans, and it's an incredible environmental impact it's having. It's really shocking.
Wow.
Is there anything else you wanted to ask?
I don't know. I mean, it's a vast subject, and I know we've really just scratched the surface of it. But I think that just from a practical point of view, if you're on a low income and you have a family to clothe and school uniform to buy, shoes, you know, and you're in the high street, is there a list online or anywhere where we can go and say, you know, you perhaps shouldn't shop here because it's not very ethical and they don't pay people the right money and everything else? Or, I mean, is there a list of shops that are great places to shop that we can get good quality clothing that people can afford? You know, that's what I'm thinking, really, from a practical point of view.
Yeah. I mean, again, I do say to people, you know, do your own research and ask the questions. I mean, a lot of those retailers will be in our Fashion Transparency Index. So if you're going to, you know, Asda or Lidl or Sainsbury's to get your school uniforms, they will be rated on there. There are apps like the Good On You app as well. I think when it comes to school uniforms, there's a podcast. I can't think of the platform at the moment, but if you look up Carrie Summers' school uniform podcast, you'll find it. And I did a podcast on school uniforms because one of the mainly projects I did with my husband Mark was we set up the UK's first fair trade and organic school uniform company many years ago when my daughter was still at primary school. And sadly, it didn't last for very long as our suppliers got poached by a rather large school uniform supplier, not particularly ethical. But one, you know, I set it up because I know people don't want to be buying school uniform which is made with child labour, but also because of the chemicals in school uniform, the Teflon, the formaldehyde. And the good news, if you're on a low wage, is that actually a lot of these chemicals make the clothing more expensive. So if you're buying a school shirt or school outfit that isn't Teflon coated, you're likely to be paying a bit less. So that's going to save you money. So look out for don't buy anything that is, you know, easy care, non-iron. I know it looks like, you know, it's going to save you a lot of time, but really awful chemicals.
Carrie, thank you ever so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. And we're going to have to get you back on board again another time, I think, because we've not covered anything like I wanted to cover today. So we're going to have to pull you back in occasionally and chat to you again sometime. I think perhaps we'll do it again even during Fashion Revolution Week, maybe. Absolutely. Something like that.
Thank you ever so much, Carrie, for your time. It's been brilliant to speak to you.
It's lovely to catch up with you as well personally. And we will see you again soon. So thank you.
Look forward to it.
Well, thank you, Carrie, for your time. We really appreciate that. And there's so much more to catch up on, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I was hoping to ask her a little bit more about her trip around the Galapagos Islands. So that's going to be interesting. So we're going to interview Carrie again at some point.
Yep.
Anyway, straight on to recommendations. A couple of weeks ago, I recommended Switch on Your Brain by Dr. Caroline Leaf. It is phenomenal. I cannot stress that enough, and it will change your life. However, that's not what I'm recommending today. I'm recommending Switch on Your Brain Every Day, which is an accompaniment to the book, and it's a daily reading, so it's a great thing to have. It has changed my life a lot. I recommend it. So get the pair, and this will help you renew your mind, just like it says in the Bible.
So Louise recommends Switch on Your Brain Every Day.
I do.
You heard it here first. Right, my recommendation. Last week we were blessed to have Dr. Michael Brown with us, and we interviewed him. His website is askdrbrown.org, and there you can find everything that Dr. Brown does, his radio shows, YouTube videos, Facebook page, and there's links to his 40 books that he's written and everything. I mean, how he found
He
time
is a busy man.
to interview us, I don't know. But anyway, go to askdrbrown.org.
And keeping on the theme of Brown, I am recommending the film Mrs. Brown, which is all about the story of Queen Victoria after her husband passes away and the relationship that she develops with Mr. Brown. It stars Judi Dench and Billy Connolly, and it's a PG, and you can find it on BBC iPlayer. So it's family viewing.
Right, third Mr. Brown is Basil Brown. Now, Basil Brown is an archaeologist, an amateur archaeologist, who's hired by a woman to go and dig a hoard at Sutton Hoo. And this was at the beginning of the Second World War, and they've just produced a film based loosely on the story, very loosely on the story, called The Dig. And it's available on Netflix. 12A, so some slightly adult themes, but it's suitable for most people. But it's beautifully shot, it really tells the story well, and it's well acted. So it's well worth your time just finding that on Netflix and watching that.
It's really good. We thoroughly enjoyed it. All that is left to say is please subscribe to this channel, because if we post any other videos, then you will be notified about them. So the button is about there. So subscribe to us, and then we'll see you next week.
Yep, I'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.